Clearly, you are a wise marketing pro who knows how irresistible a compelling brand story can be, because you're back with me for another edition of The Business of Story. Hi, I'm your host, Park Hell, and I'm so glad you're here because we all know the power of a crystal clear story that actually excites prospects and customers to action. But finding that clarity can be murky business. So I have the one and only clarity wizard for you today, Kathy Guzman Galloway, a consumer packaged goods branding guru who will share her framework to help you find clarity in your brand storytelling. Have you ever found yourself in a sales pitch and you were totally pumped about sharing the remarkable attributes of your product or service, but you became frustrated, even a little embarrassed, because you came off sounding like this?
For a number of years now, work has been proceeding in order to bring perfection to the crudely conceived idea of a transmission that would not only supply inverse reactive current for use in unilateral phase detractors, but would also be capable of automatically synchronizing cardinal grammeters. Such an instrument is the turbo-encapulator. The original machine had a base plate of prefamulated amulite. It may also be employed in conjunction with a drawn reciprocation dingle arm to reduce sinusoidal repleneration.
If you're leading your pitches with data, graphs, charts, and stats, salted with a little jargon, then you are that guy, and your message repels versus resonates. Now you can immediately simplify, even humanize your complex messages, so you become immensely more influential when you follow an easy 3-word story structure called the and, but, therefore, or ABT. The ABT Agile Narrative Framework will help you sell more by actually saying less. Learn how to put this messaging marvel to work for you through a quick online course at businessofstory.com/ABT and stop sounding like a bot to your buyer.
The latter consisted simply of 6 hydrocoptic Marsal veins so fitted to the ambifacient lunar wane shaft that side fumbling was effectively prevented.
I mean, what do you have to lose but the side-fumbling Marsal vein of your current communication that is actually boring buyers? So for simply clearer storytelling, visit businessofstory.com/ABT and start excelling through the stories you're telling. Now, we often think of the ABT as just a narrative framework to make your messages land right the first time, and it's fabulous at that. But you can also use the ABT as a discovery tool when you are trying to clarify the problem you will be solving for your customer. Think of the ABT as a storytelling listening tool that you employ in those moments when you have someone ranting and raving about solving a particular problem. As all top sales and marketing people know, what you do is you shut up and you listen, intently receiving their verbal vomit, all the while filtering their intel through an ABT in your mind. When they finally take a breath, you simply say, what I heard is that you want such and such, and it's important to you because of this and that. But you're frustrated because of this particular problem that is impeding your progress. So you need to find a solution that might look like this. I've experienced how well the ABT as a story listening tool works. Your prospect will say, wow, you said that better than I did. You actually listened to me and care. In fact, you said it so well that I forgot to tell you one other thing. And guess what? It's always that one other thing that is truly the problem they're trying to solve. Everything else are just symptoms of the problem. Try it. Use the ABT as a story listening tool and see how your discovery process becomes much more valuable to you and to your prospect. Now, you can also use the ABT as a focusing tool. If you have a big presentation to make, a video to produce, a white paper, or any long-form content to write, well, start using the ABT on yourself to focus your narrative on a singular problem-solution dynamic. Despite popular belief, our brains are not good multitaskers. Your audience wants to, and even needs to, focus on a singular problem-solution dynamic that is clear, compelling, and easy to get. Finally, you will benefit by using the ABT as a strategy tool. The simplest way to try the ABT as a strategy tool is to use it to align your people in the next meeting you call. Craft an ABT for the meeting with the strategy of solving just one problem. It will keep you and your team from running down unproductive rabbit holes. You will expedite your meeting, and you will have a clear way forward for everyone to follow. I had a client that was bemoaning their lengthy, unproductive meetings. Some of them last a couple of hours and we get little in return, she muttered. I challenged her to use the ABT as a strategy tool for her next meeting, providing the focus of solving just one problem. When I spoke with her a week later, she said the first time she organized a meeting using the ABT, that it cut the time down from an hour to just 20 minutes, and everyone knew precisely what the next steps were to solve their problem. So use the ABT as a story listening tool for your discovery, as a story strategy tool to clarify the way forward, as a focusing tool to dial in your presentations on a singular problem-solution dynamic, and of course, as the popular narrative tool it is, to amplify the impact of your business points and stories that propel your presentations forward and transport your audiences into your world. Now, the common theme here is clarity. And Kathy Guzman Galloway has built a tremendous career as the clarity wizard.
It starts with brand purpose, which is anchored in a belief. A belief is a tension that exists in the world that we feel compelled to go address. That is your purpose. Then it's your mission. What am I actually going to do about this purpose? I am being called to do fill in the blank. I got to go do something about it. That is my mission. And then I actually talk about the product. I challenge people to think about that as a tool to deliver on your purpose. That product has got to connect back to why I wake up every day. And the only way we can do that is by starting with the purpose and understanding what the purpose is so that all of the dots can connect back together.
Kathy is a 20-year veteran of the CPG world. She operates in her zone of genius as a strategist and facilitator, helping organize data and thoughts to create the clarity needed to make decisions with confidence. In the past 10 years, she has built her consultancy, The Clarity Wizard, by working with some of the largest, youngest, and most innovative brands. As a strategist, she helps brands drive growth with strategy and innovation. And as a facilitator, she provides strategic thought leadership for clients who are often too busy running their business to find quote-unquote thinking time to grow their business through the clarity she provides. Today, you will learn how to organize your thoughts, as this is the beginning of clarity. We explore the importance of knowing your audience so you can prioritize what to say and when to say it to them. To be extremely choiceful with your words, because every word implies tone, message, and emotion. And what the Clarity Catalyst framework is and how to use it. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Kathy Guzman Galloway. Kathy, the Clarity Wizard, welcome to the Business of Story.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate it.
I am too. You know, after all these years, 8 years of producing the show, we often talk about clarity and messaging and so forth, but I don't think we've ever had one show specifically on clarity. And I think it is so important in this day and age when we are all just completely overwhelmed and bombarded with information, communications, brand offerings, you name it. You know, the attention economy. is kind of the enemy here. It's what we're working in. And the way to overcome that is the work that you do around clarity. So
Mm.
glad to have you here. And I'd love for you to share a little bit of your backstory. How do you find yourself as the clarity wizard?
Yes, thank you. I made my way into the CPG world, consumer packaged goods, through PepsiCo. And I think that PepsiCo machine is probably the first place that I discovered I had a knack for what I didn't know at the time was clarity, but this ability to take a lot of information and synthesize it into what was important. I certainly didn't know how I was doing it. It just felt intuitive, but it was a lot of honing of that in an organization like PepsiCo and a lot of these sort of Fortune 500
Mhm.
companies that spend a lot of time synthesizing information in order to make strategic choices and strategic decisions.
And what were you doing at PepsiCo?
I was in the Frito-Lay division. So for a good period of time there, I was part of the Lay's brand team working on their strategic planning process. And then once that was set, executing for the year. So really traditional, classic brand management type of assignments.
And did you come up through the brand management world? I mean, is that what you studied in
Exactly.
school? And so that was
Yes.
your trajectory all along.
Yes, exactly. So I'm originally from the East Coast, from New Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. And I came to Texas, where I live now, to attend the University of Texas at Austin. And I had a
Hook
fellowship with
'em
the
horns.
consortium for, that's right, Macomb School of Business. I had a fellowship with the consortium for graduate management, went to Texas, which was eye-opening from a girl from Jersey, but eye-opening, I think, because there weren't as many people with cowboy hats as I expected. So
Right.
that was nice.
Yep. Yep.
And right out of business school was recruited by PepsiCo and given an assignment at Frito-Lay. And really, I am a classically trained brand management strategist is really the work that I do. And over the years, so the 8 or 9 years I spent at PepsiCo, and then a couple of smaller roles at other CPG companies until finally decided to become a consultant. It's been about 11 years now that I started my company. And even in the early years, I was doing positioning work, but I was also doing a lot of other brand and brand strategy work. But more and more, I was getting pulled in by my clients into their positioning work. In the last few years, I started teaching positioning to founders and startups in CPG through accelerators and different programs, particularly Black and Brown founders. And just that experience continued to illuminate that skill set that I have, what I now call that sort of zone of genius of being able to see the forest and the trees at the same time, being able to help people communicate better what they are trying to communicate to the world, in addition to finding an audience that clearly needed it. And the reason that the audience needs it more often than not is just that they don't have the time to sit and think about, how do I articulate something so clearly? They got to run their business day to day. And it became really clear that there was an opportunity for that. And then, of course, the third part of Zone of Genius is I just absolutely love to do it. I love talking about consumers. I love talking about what their needs are and how do we solve them, and helping brands just figure out, how do I present myself in a way that's compelling and motivating to drive a behavior change? Because ultimately is all we're trying to do here is get somebody to do something. But in the old ways, we thought marketing was trying to fool us into it. In this day and age, it's about really understanding what people want and being able to repeat that back to them. And that to me is really where the clarity can be powerful, and understanding that audience, understanding what they want, so you can talk to them in their language, and be more successful. So that's kind of how I got into and fell in love with this idea of clarity. Yeah.
Well, Kathy, I know what you mean. I mean, I've been in the branding world for almost 40 years and ran my own ad agency. A lot of us, our specialties was around branding. And people would say to me too, they say, Park, you just have a knack of boiling down these very complex ideas and finding the hook, the simple little hook. And honestly, Kathy, I do not know where that comes from. So it kind of sounds like your story of what you were saying, that you found this somewhat of a superpower at PepsiCo, but you didn't know that you had it in hindsight and looking back at your upbringing and your education and your curiosities and passions. Is there a moment that you can point to that you think like, oh, that's where this proclivity to clarity comes from?
Yeah. I think the real place where I could visualize and articulate that there was power there was when I started to talk to people outside of CPG. So in the CPG world and among marketers,
CPG being consumer packaged goods. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and consumer packaged goods are what you're going to find at Target or Walmart, grocery store. It's food, beverage, which is my specialty, food,
Fritos.
beverage.
I love Fritos.
Exactly. The stuff we love to eat, the stuff we have to eat, but also household products, beauty products, sort of anything really, again, that you would find at a Walmart or a Target. And so when I'm talking to folks in that space that, like yourself, that have been around a while, you know this work, even if it's not your specialty, you recognize it, you see it, you know the way it's supposed to look. There wasn't just a lot of conversation for the power that I had because it was recognized, it was understood, I was given value for that, and that's it. No more to talk about. Mm-hmm. Once I started to leave that ecosystem and come across people who are brave enough, in my opinion, to start a CPG brand, I started getting things back that made me realize that this was unique in the broader world. It wasn't really something everyone else had that maybe many times I took for granted. And just like you said, where I start working with folks and they're like, I don't know how you got to that. Like, how did you even get to those words? Or like, man, you really understood what we were saying. I don't know how it happens. There's something, sort of baked in and intuitive about it. But that's where it really all started to like light bulb for me and continue to hone in that expertise around positioning that I don't think I would have ever gotten to if I had not been exposed to, non-CPGers, right?
Yeah. Give us an example of a large challenge that you came into, I should say. Maybe it's a customer or client, or maybe it was one at PepsiCo or something, that you were handed a very complex or obfuscated message or brand. These people they have a robust business, they've got a good product, they just don't know how to talk about it. Where you had to take a very complex idea and boil it down to its simplest essence. Got an example of that?
Yes. And what I'll say about this example is that the complexity was in the unknown much more than it was complexity in what we were working with. This is a client of mine. It's a 180-year-old brand. We've worked together on a number of things over the years and finally came to the place where it was clear that we need to revisit this brand positioning. And as you know, brands have to revisit positioning, I would argue, at least every 3 years. The reason for that is that the world is changing. The consumer is changing. There's always something else the consumer is thinking and talking about, and we need to be ready to pivot the way we talk about our business to match where the consumer is. So this brand had obviously gone through numerous repositionings over the years, but particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, as you're certainly aware, and I imagine most of your audience is aware, there's been an explosion of founder-led brands, these smaller brands that are coming onto the marketplace and delivering these new, innovative, unique benefits, formats, pricing strategy, go-to-market strategy, which makes it really hard for some of these older established brands to compete. This brand, where they were struggling is that they'd lost their point of differentiation. What was valuable 50 years ago is not enough today.
What were they selling?
They were selling snack products for kids. I don't want to say the category because It's one of the only large established 180-year-old brands in the
Mhm. Okay,
category.
but a CPG brand
But
for
it's a
kids.
CPG. It's actually a family brand, but where their gap was in this challenge and positioning was in having something differentiated specifically around the kid offering and trying to just understand how much do we talk to mom? How much do we talk to the kid? What are the dynamics between this relationship between mom and kid? And what is it that we are bringing to the table that is unique and different? And the real work was in, as it almost always is, going back to the consumer. How are you engaging with the brands that you see in the marketplace today? What are they offering you that we aren't? What is missing even beyond that? And then going the 10 layers deeper than that. Why does this matter to you? And I'll give you an example within an example, which is the point of quality. Quality is it's an attribute, a benefit, however you describe it, that has always mattered, right? It is a timeless benefit from the beginning of time and remains today. But what has changed is what quality means. 50 years ago, honestly, even 20 years ago, quality was about how you are producing this product and I'm getting the same thing every time. I can expect to have this experience always. But today, quality means a large assortment of things. Quality means, yes, I'm going to expect the same thing. Also, that the ingredients are at the level of quality I expect, but also where you've sourced them from. It's also about how the product gets to me and whether you are contributing to the problem of global warming or not, climate change or not. It's also about the way you formulate. Have you chosen to go down a simple path or a more complex path? And the list goes on all the way down to the values of the company, the purpose and the mission of the company. All of that is being tied into quality in a way that brand just hadn't thought about, weren't thinking about. It's not an issue at all. And so that's where I say that what we were starting with didn't feel complex. But as we started to peel that onion and talk to consumers, we realized, shoot, this isn't just about these are the best fill in the blank ingredients, but all of these other things that become difficult to talk about in a succinct way. We got there. It's certainly not something that I can share, but it's an experience that has happened over and over again. I actually call that the and also problem. Brands are coming in and saying, I can do this and also this and also this, and the list goes on. That is an ineffective way of communicating to folks. And that was part of the challenge that we were having with that brand. So ultimately we got to where we needed to go, but it's, as you know, it's working and reworking and finding just the right words to communicate it.
Yeah, and that and also problem, I think we see all the time with our customers and our clients because they want to be all things to all people and they want to hedge their bets that, okay, we
Right.
can offer this, but we can also offer this, but we can also offer this in hopes that all of that different offering is going to make a difference to their customers. And yet it comes back to that Pareto principle, right? I mean, 80% of your sales are coming from 20% of your customers, which are typically one customer persona who is after the solution to one problem.
Exactly. I just taught a class yesterday with a group of founders. And the way that I refer to that consumer is this is the person that you need to work the smallest amount to get them. I just have to tell you this thing exists and you are ready to buy immediately so that your investment in them is highly efficient, but it can quickly turn into more of a relationship and an emotional connection rather than having to convince you that you should buy this product. If you can win that person, those other people will show up when they are ready or when they need you. But getting that center person solves all the problems,
Yeah,
right?
it really does. It's like the energy of that singular audience that you're working with attracts other like-minded people that aren't exactly your audience you're talking to, but can still use that product or service solution that you are providing. And it's
Yeah.
so important to focus on that one thing. My good friend Greg Head, who is all about the startup community, and he has an excellent podcast. I'll think about it here in a second. It's all for founders. The Practical Founder is what it's called. And he says the same thing, especially in the tech world, where we live in this land of abundance and you got to find your one thing. And one of his favorite analogies, and I think you'll appreciate this, Kathy, is that, what's like the most successful fast food restaurant in the world if you judge it on volume and revenue. And he points to Whataburger. Now at Whataburger, you can only buy a burger, right? And you only have a few burgers to choose from and delicious fries and a milkshake or your drink. And that's it. They're not selling salads and chicken and all this other stuff where, McDonald's does. It's that one thing. It's the clarity. I mean, Chick-fil-A. What do they sell?
Exactly what I was thinking about.
Chicken. Right. So that falls into the thinking of all brands. Would you agree that get down to that one point of differentiation?
Yeah, I think what's challenging for CPG brands in that way is that, at least for those that are more established, my typical client is somewhere in the 100 million plus a year. And for those brands, particularly those that haven't quite made it to the stratosphere over $1 billion, what happens, unfortunately, is that we get sucked into the portfolio of offerings. And without clarity on the audience and positioning, you very quickly start to dilute the key benefit of that brand and find yourself providing an assortment of things that quite don't fit. I think the exception to that is beauty, where a brand like, say, like Shea Moisture, if anyone's familiar with that, is started as a multicultural hair care brand, was then bought by L'Oreal. Their launch strategy was to penetrate as many categories as possible and in as many ways as possible. It's certainly an approach, and in beauty, I think it works. But most of those other product categories, particularly food and beverage, having that thing, that one idea that you are known for and that really brings your brand to the forefront is necessary for success in CPG today, for sure.
Do you have an example of a CPG brand, or any brand for that matter, that is not doing it well, that is struggling because they do not have clarity and focus?
You know what's so funny about that is that it is hard to know if someone is delivering on their positioning if you are not inside of the building. And the reason I say that is that there are obviously some things you can see right away. This was a huge loss. I'll give you one example of that always comes to mind is Simply, the juice brand, going into like spiked beverages. I don't know how that's done, but how the product did, but it feels just off from what we've known that brand to be. And there are some examples like that where there's clearly a sore thumb that comes out, but otherwise it's hard to know, because I can look at, say, a package, for example. The two of us can, which might be an interesting episode for us to just review packaging of products, right?
Right.
And we can guesstimate who they might be targeting, but it really depends on the insights behind the strategy. And without peeking under that tent, it can be really hard to figure out if they did it right or wrong. Otherwise, we're just going off of kind of subjective opinions. But that Simply example where you can clearly tell folks have gone off, those are startling and shocking in that way, like the Simply Spiked was, right? At least for me, it was.
A brand to me that I think, a luxury brand actually, that I think has become remarkably diluted. And for me, it seems like it's lost its way. I don't know. I don't drive one, but it's Mercedes. And I say that only because when I drive down the road or I go down into Phoenix where the Mercedes are buzzing everywhere, there are so many models and looks. And I can't tell what they stand for anymore. I mean, it's German engineering and all that BS or whatever.
Right.
But you get in some of their lesser, less costly models, and they're chintzy feeling. They don't feel luxury at all. And then you got all these different body styles and shapes. To me, it feels like it's lost its way. Then when you look at either like Audi or BMW, they have far less models to choose from. And to me, it seems like there's a more core brand story to them, compared
Right.
to Mercedes.
Yeah, and so there my questions to the Mercedes team would be what is the strategy? Why are we making these choices? Is there something we don't see that either that likely made sense at the time in thinking about this portfolio of cars, that perhaps something has changed that did not allow the execution to work well? Because as you know, intentions are great in a building of smart people, but 90% of it is execution, right? You got to be able to actually deliver on this strategic idea. And so I obviously never worked with the Mercedes team, but I would imagine there was some great idea was uncovered that helped them expand their penetration, or get a greater share of market that fell apart somewhere along the line. I try to give them the benefit of the doubt, but the realities of the world don't give you any benefit whatsoever, right? Yeah.
Now, for those listening and they feel like maybe they don't quite yet know their brand story, or they're trying to refine it, or they know that it's too complex right now and they're all over the place. I do a lot of work in the tech world these days, especially related to AI. And I hear the same thing coming from the technologists. We know this technology inside and out. We are trailblazing in the AI arena and whatever. We just don't know how to talk about it. So what are some of the steps, or do you have a framework that you use to be able to help dial in your clients' brand stories, find that positioning, and ultimately arrive at that clarity?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I do have a framework that is quite detailed, so I won't go through it, but there are some pillars of the process that are obvious in many ways and repeatable across any industry or category. And the first of that to me, which is truly the foundation of clarity, is to know what you know. What do we really know? One of the workshops I do with clients is a hypothesizing session where we all sit in a room, typically the large enough cross-functional team that we can gather, where folks are just brainstorming what we think needs to be true in order for us to succeed at fill in the blank initiative. And what that does is start to very quickly uncover what you think is true versus what I think is true. And how does that compare to the facts we have on hand? So step one is let's just be clear what we actually know, what we think are hypotheses, and what are just plain assumptions that we have no reason to believe are true. Number one. Number two then is, and always is a step, regardless of the category or what you're selling, go find out more about your audience. So particularly for brands who struggle with, how do I talk about the thing I have, which is a lot of founders. It's same as in tech. It also is in CPG. I just don't even know how to talk about this thing that is either brand new to the world, as in AI, or as an example in the CPG world, it's the non-alcoholic space a couple of years ago was, in many ways, even still, really difficult to figure out how to talk about this to a society that is in many ways obsessed with drinking and drinking alcohol. How do we now talk about a time and an occasion when you are not going to drink alcohol? And so going back to the consumer, spending time understanding not only what they think in that initial gut reaction about the space, but also how do they behave when there isn't somebody watching, or they think there isn't somebody watching. What are you doing when you have your event and people are coming over and somebody doesn't drink alcohol? What do you do? Do you make them feel at home? Do they feel uncomfortable? What kind of drinks are you giving them? And then the third piece of that is having them tell you their own words. And that ultimately is the biggest unlock. We think we want to call that a non-alcoholic product, or we think this is a better for you cookie, or we think that this is a great way to have an affordable Mercedes experience. great. But if they were to talk to Park would say, this is not a Mercedes experience. This is a fill in the blank experience. And assuming they wanted to go down that path, that fill in the blank experience you offered them is what they need to be talking about. We need to talk to them the way they talk about things. And that's where the unlock of the messaging really comes in, is in knowing their own words and repeating it back to them. The last piece of that is the third of those platforms, is being as choiceful as possible with words. Because every single word implies a tone, a message, an emotion. And when you are synthesizing language down to its most purest essence, the word you choose matters. I actually, just before I joined you here, was working on a positioning for a protein bar brand with a client we were just working on together. And one of the things we were working through was the word nurture, and whether there's a place for nurture. And the intention of using nurture at the time in this category of protein bars was to talk about how this bar and this brand helps to fuel the things that you want to do as a person, things you want to achieve. Great. That sounds accurate. We want to nurture that. But in reality, the brand doesn't really nurture that. What we learned from consumers is that I don't want you to tell me what my passions are. I don't need you to help me with my passion. I got that. What I need you to do is help me get to my passion, help me deliver on my passion. And so the word nurture doesn't quite fit in the way that we were talking about it. So again, this point of making sure you get to the word that really means what you're trying to communicate is the last key to getting that clarity around how you talk about your brand. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Kathy, you do a lot of work with women entrepreneurs, right? I was listening to your podcast, excellent show, by the way. And you share with them, when is the right time, or is it ever going to be the right time to maybe pivot out of your corporate life and go out and do what you're doing, what I do, consulting. It's not for everybody, but it is a great avenue for a lot of folks. Now, say I'm a female consultant. I've just come out. I'm trying to dial in my brand story. I don't have the money, the time, the resources to go and do a big interview of audiences and that sort of thing. What are a few first little steps people can do to clarify what can be right now a very confusing, complex story?
Yes, thank you for asking this question. I get it a lot from really anyone I talk to that is trying to communicate something. And the reality is we all have access to more data and more insights than you think you do. If you are someone, as you described, who's going into consulting or doing any sort of service business, you're leaving your career and trying to figure out an audience, look around. Your customer is everywhere. You know who your customer is. Find some friends, ex-colleagues, ex-bosses, people in your community, folks in the organizations you're in. You will absolutely find people that you can have a conversation with. And especially early on in those early days, you don't need 1,000 people. You can start with 10. I think especially starting businesses, whether it's a CPG brand or anything else, it's all about that early iteration. How can I get just enough information to get me to the next step, to make some assumptions and hypotheses about what I think is true until I can get more insight and more information to course correct? We don't need to get it at 100 day one. We just need to get it far enough that we feel like we're on the right path. And right, as Oprah always says, is once you know more, once you know better, you do better. That's exactly what this process is about. On the business side, though, if a brand has already started, a brand, service, company of any sort, if you've already started selling something, you already have insights. You've already had it, right? You pitch somebody, you have a website up, you have a social media account. There are people out there already engaging with your business. Reach out to them. Some of the ways I talk to small brands about getting insights and research is, one, you should always be doing a post-purchase survey. Now, I'm assuming you're selling D2C. You always need to do that, right? Number two is Find 5 people who just recently bought your brand new to your brand or your company or your service. Talk to them. Why did you pick us up? What were you using before? What made you come and try us? And why did you leave the other one? Then find 5 people who tried and did not repeat. They tried it, they never came back. Why didn't you come back? I'm not trying to sell you. I don't want you to come back if you don't want to, but I want to learn from you. Why didn't you come back? What did you go find? And then the last one I offer up is, which takes a little bit more effort, is to recruit your own panel. If you're already selling, you have some people in there who've done some repeat purchases, invite them in, and once a month, set up an hour call and do a focus group. How have you been using the product this month? What have you seen in the marketplace that's new, better, different? And keep that continuous loop of learning through a panel type of a research platform that, again, all of these things are so cheap. You give them some free product, you give them an hour free of consulting, whatever that is, in exchange for their time. So the data is out there. You just got to go find it. Yeah.
Now, you've got this clarity catalyst framework. Is those first 3 steps, is that a part of the framework, or can we dig a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, the framework is structured specifically for CPG brands, although folks who've seen it and participated in it seem to find that there are applications in other places, but that's my expertise, is how I built it and designed it. And it's actually set up in a way to make sure you've filled in all of the holes. What I have found in CPG is the reason brands get stuck on positioning, especially very new brands or that mid-tier of brands, emerging or established brands in the 100 million to just under 1 billion, is that we do have a lot to say about the business. We just don't know how and when to say all of these different pieces. And when you look only at positioning, which, I define positioning as at the brand, sub-brand, product level, we're talking about why is somebody actually buying this specific thing. It's a thing in the consumer's hand. You need to clear out all of that noise. You can't be talking about purpose and sourcing and your values and like my tone of voice. Like that does not belong in positioning. But all of it is important, right? So how do we make sure all those pieces are there? That's really what my framework does. It starts with brand purpose, which is anchored in a belief. A belief is a tension that exists in the world that we need to go, that we feel compelled to go address. That is your purpose. Then it's your mission. What am I actually going to do about this purpose? I am being called to do fill in the blank. I got to go do something about it. That is my mission. And then I actually talk about the products, if you have multiple, as I challenge people to think about that as a tool to deliver on your purpose. That product has got to connect back to why I wake up every day. And the only way we can do that is by starting with the purpose and understanding what the purpose is so that all of the dots can connect back together. Once we've figured out positioning, what is left is then values. And values is really important to articulate because a lot of times values show up in positioning. One that shows up all the time, sustainability. Everybody else talks about sustainability. Everything's eco, everything's recyclable. Great. That doesn't mean that's the reason why a consumer is coming to you or why they would choose you over someone else. That might belong in your values. This is how we operate as a company, not necessarily why you're going to pick this product. Then the last piece is identity. And an identity obviously has all of the components that you imagine of visual identity, but it has also things like archetype, your tone and your voice, as well as pulling in purpose, mission, positioning, and values, all of which influence identity. And so the whole of this framework just makes sure that you've got these fundamentals on which to stand up your brand. I refer to all of those as the fundamentals are the heart of your brand. This is what we're contributing to the world. We're looking at all of these things through the lens of my ability to have an impact on the world, on people, on history. Everything else is about ambition, vision, your strategies, your pricing, like all of that stuff, your other things you're doing, that's for you. all of this stuff is for the world, is for the consumer, is for the industry, the categories, for society, the things I'm doing to impact it. So once we can get all of those pieces together, it just makes brand positioning that much easier, because you can rest easy that everything's covered. I got all the pieces down. Now I can focus. Let's just make sure the product is right? That's my framework, the clarity catalyst.
And anybody can walk through that, whether you're a billion-dollar brand or
Absolutely.
a solopreneur, a man or woman launching a new consulting practice, or you've got a new startup. Anybody
Yes.
can apply that.
Yeah, absolutely. The principles really are the same. I use it mostly for CPG, but as I said, I've heard from folks like, this is great. This is really applicable to me thinking about other things. And I'll tell you, I have a good friend of mine who is writing a book. He had the opportunity to, or I should say, he set an opportunity for himself to visit a new church every week for a year. He used that then to start a blog, and now he's thinking about writing a book. And we use that framework to help him think about, what is really my role here? What am I trying to do? Am I trying to get people to come back to the church? Am I trying to get people to come to my church? Am I trying to, which is where we ended, inspire people to rethink what church is? And so that had nothing to do with a product. It started with the idea of a book, but it really quickly expanded to, no, let's just think more broadly about this entire thing that you're trying to do and how it may show up for you in the future. And even in doing that work, we can imagine more fully where this goes. Yes, you're writing a book, but we can see you speaking. We can see you doing training. We can see you doing meetups. All of that comes from the inspiration of the purpose. And so, yes, this can apply to anyone doing anything, really.
Yeah. And I know clarity is so important. And you were kind enough to explore through our ABTs of Agile Communications online course. Took the first module, and I don't typically invite guests to do that, but given your background, so similar to mine in brand story development and ultimately finding that clarity, you did the first model of the and but therefore. How do you see it? Number one, what was your take on it, and how do you see that used for creating clarity for brands?
Yeah, I was so surprised as soon as I didn't know what to expect at all. But so when I clicked in and I started watching it, I started to light up right away, because as is true for a lot of things, you're not using the same words I'm using, but the intention and the approach, and more importantly, the output, very, very similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I love about what you've done here is that you're saying, first and foremost, who is this person? And I love your push on, tell me literally who this person is, separate and different from their problem. Right? What is it about this person that makes them ideal for this product? So in the class yesterday when I was teaching them, think of an example of a brand. There was a pet product. It's a doctor, a veterinarian, and he is creating a line of pet products so that you don't need to go to the vet. And we started talking about, well, like, who is this person that would do this? So he immediately went to, this is somebody whose dog is not feeling well and they need to, okay, great. That's their problem. This is what we're going to solve for. But let's back up and talk about, what's the kind of person who would even want to solve it at home? What makes this the type of person that would be willing to go to your website, or in some future state, he hopes to be in like a CVS. If you're at a CVS, what would make me go to a CVS to get something from my dog? Because not all dog owners would do that. Let's talk about that. This person is self-motivated. They want to treat their pets like their children. They want to solve their pet's issues. They're so connected to the pet that they get that the pet is ill. They can tell the pet is sick. That is not everybody. And so spending that time really thinking about this person and what makes them the type of person that would want your product. And then separately, what's the problem they have that we are solving for them? That is all golden. So I absolutely love that you start there. So powerful.
Oh, thanks. And yeah, with that and statement of agreement, you've got three things you want to do with that. That's identify that person, that individual, be as specific as you possibly can, because the power of story rests in the specifics. What do they want relative to your offering? And they don't even know about your offering yet. What is it that they want, and why is that important? I just finished up a really powerful book called Mind Stuck. And it's how to convince stubborn people. In fact, Michael McQueen, I just had him on the show this past week, right before you. And in there, he talks about priming an audience, so that you can share a common ground, get them in the right place, bring in contradiction or conflict, some contrast to really fire up the mind. That's where the problem comes in. And then language. And he said, priming, contrast, and language is so important when you are trying to be able to persuade someone to see it your way. So with the and, but, therefore, I realized that first statement of agreement is priming. I'm identifying you as my audience, what you want relative to my offering, and why that's important to you. So you find that common ground and you get them doing exactly what you're doing right now. You're nodding in agreement.
Right.
Then you introduce that contrast or conflict, but it's frustrating. You don't have it because of this major problem.
Yeah.
Therefore, here's the way forward. And to your point earlier, and you had said in the notes that you sent over, how language plays such an important role of using the right words that really connect with your audience.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I want to touch on your but. The second half of your first sentence of the and the but that you have live in my framework as one piece, one component where you're articulating the pain point. Same idea, just reorganized. And what you've done, similar to what I've done, is that it's almost formulaic in nature. This is what I want. This is what's important to me. Here's what's in the world, and this is why it doesn't work. And that's really the simplest way to articulate what the problem is. We don't need a lot of extra fluff there because, to your point, the language is so important. Getting to a succinct version of this, which by the way, I love that I'm looking at your template right now as we're talking, and I love that there's 2 lines, right? Like you have very few lines here for folks to work. And that's important because you could write a 10-page dissertation on the and, but, therefore, right? That's not helping anyone at all. Yeah. So having the right words in the smallest amount of words necessary to communicate that point and still get across these critical things. Who is the person? Why is this important to them? What do they need? What is wrong? And what is your solution? With the fewest words possible. Every single word counts. Every single word is working hard, right?
Yeah, the shortest ABT I know, Kathy, is this. The ABT is short and sweet, but tricky. Therefore, practice.
That's fantastic.
There's clarity for you, right?
That's right. It cannot be clearer, right? When you stick to a framework like yours or mine, and there are others, right? We didn't invent this from scratch. We're just providing people a way to think about it. When you get through that, there is no better feeling of, I nailed it. Like now I feel good that I know what I'm talking about. And I can communicate that to other people, and I feel good that they're going to know what I'm talking about. It's such a powerful moment when I'm working with a brand and we get to that end state, and you can like sense that collective sigh of relief. I'm sure you've experienced that where people are like, finally, I feel so good that I got to what I wanted. And it's worth the work because it is work. It takes time and effort to do it, but it's so worth it, right?
Yeah, and when it comes right down to it, clarity leads to certainty. And if people are going to buy into your product or service or your vision or your mission or anything that you are trying to sell to get them to buy into, they have to have certainty. And if you are unclear in how you tell that story, that certainty goes right out the window. And people are looking around going, I don't even know really what you do. What the hell's going on? And we can get so close to it in our own worlds. It's hard to find that clarity if you don't have someone like yourself to come in and help find that clarity that leads to certainty.
Or Park. Any of us experts on that clarity. Yeah, you're right. It is really hard, and it is, what's the word? It's almost like painful. It is a weight. I know many CMOs, SVPs, VPs, senior directors who are sitting there staring at their brand plan, their strategy, a brief or creative that's come back, and it's like, oh gosh, like I know this is not quite right. I just don't have the time to sit and work through this. And so I'm stuck with something that doesn't feel great, which is why I talk about the work that I do is about creating clarity and optimizing brand positioning in order to, yes, increase revenue, but also decrease risk. Because that's where the risk comes in, that you don't have that confidence in what you're saying. Who knows what's going to happen? And I trust that everybody's walking into a higher target revenue number than they did last year and last quarter and last month, right? And so now it's getting harder and harder and harder. You've got to have that clarity to get there.
Well, how can people get more clarity with you? Where can they find you and your resources and so forth?
Yes, thank you. The easiest way to get to me is theclaritywizard.com/podcast. I've got some free gifts that I give out for folks listening into some episodes, some templates, some free trainings. So you can access it there, but I am very heavy on LinkedIn. So if you want to come follow me, connect with me, I accept all connections because I think the more of us working together, the better. So come on in and accept my connection that way. And you can always reach out through LinkedIn or through my website to connect with me directly.
That sounds great. Well, thank you for connecting with us here, taking the time. I know you're extraordinarily busy. You've got some family time coming up for you this weekend, so have fun with that. Safe travels. And Kathy, I can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. And I love getting to talk to somebody who thinks like me and is in the world like me. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Park. Hopefully you'll have me back. We can talk about some other fun clarity stuff.
Would love to. I want to do that show where we're bringing in a bunch of CPG brands and looking at them and saying who's winning, who's losing in the clarity game. We'll have to do that.
Love it. Thanks, Farg.
Thank you for listening to and sharing this episode with anyone you know who will benefit from Kathy's amazing insights on how to find the clarity in your story marketing. Our show is produced by Caden Howell, music composed by Darius Holbert, and community development and marketing by Marissa Hill. I hope you'll join me next Monday when highly awarded documentary filmmaker Roger Sorkin will join us to share how you can make complex stories like climate change and global warming clear and compelling so that audiences not only lean into your storytelling, but take action. Until then, remember that clearly the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one epic. Thanks so much for listening.